Hey, Renter Retires, it's Adam Schroeder here with another episode, joined as usual by Zach Lemaster, the founder and CEO of Renter Retirement. And we are pleased to be joined today by David Olds. He is the CEO of EZ REI Closings. David, thanks for joining us today.
Guys, man, I'm thrilled to be here. I appreciate you inviting me. I feel like I made the big time now.
Well, we appreciate it, and we're going to start where we always start, and that's people want to know, what was your first real estate deal? What got you in? And then after that first deal, what kept you hooked?
Yeah, so a little bit different for me. I grew up in Boston or outside of Boston, actually almost up on the New Hampshire border. But, my dad was an ex-military guy, and we were always fixing up houses and, just home remodeling type stuff. And, of course, as a kid, I hated it. Like, I detested it. And, I said, when I grow up, I'm never going to make my kids do this, raking grass and, sheetrock and going to the hardware store for your parents. So, it's kind of funny. Once I got married in 2002, we decided to buy a house. And what did we do? I became exactly like my parents, tore the house apart, did a bunch of fixing up. But interesting thing, it was going to be our first house, and we were just going to live there forever, like in Apopka, Florida, which ridiculous to think that. But we bought this house and went in and stripped out the carpet, redid the cabinets, swapped out a sliding door for French door, all that kind of stuff. And then we resold it 2 years later and made $50,000 on it. And it was interesting, when we bought the house, I didn't understand why there was nobody on the other side of the closing table, because I'd seen TV and video, right? Like, there's supposed to be a whole thing, right? Passing keys across the table, and nobody was there. And I was buying it from Wells Fargo. And in 2002, foreclosures weren't really a thing. So my realtor's like, well, dummy, it's a foreclosure. So bought our first property was really a foreclosure. We lived in it, fixed it up. And then when we sold it 2 years later, same realtor, going back to the title company, she's like, you don't have to pay taxes on this money. I'm like, what? She's like, yeah, dummy. She called me dummy a lot, but it's like, yeah, it's tax-free because you actually lived in it. I'm like, oh, wow, that's pretty awesome. So, now we started buying these houses with the intent to buy them and fix them up and just live in them 2 years, because my wife and I both had full-time jobs. So we sort of became part-time flippers. And the next one we bought, we made like a little over $100,000 on. And then at that point, I'm like, well, I need to get involved in a REIA and figure this stuff out, because I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And what's he say? Find yourself a real estate group. So the first true investment property I bought was in it was DeBerry, Florida. It was just a subject to that I've been doing, sending out letters and mailers, just like the people at the REIA came in and told us to do. And I took over this property from a son whose parents had died, and it was their house. And we took over the 2 loans, fixed that up, and then sold it, and then just started doing that, more and more and more. So yeah, first deal, subject to. It was I was never so nervous in all of my life, except like when I asked my wife to marry me. Like, I was petrified. And when they said yes, I was standing at the kitchen counter, and it felt like an out-of-body experience. I'm like, oh my God, this is working. This is really a thing. This is actually real. So that was our first like true investment deal.
How'd that one go?
Pretty good. What we didn't realize is, I started this in 2002. So this is probably maybe 2005, and the market was starting to shift really slow. Being in Florida, which was one of the worst areas to be in, when the market crashed in 9 and 10, I tell people, it's like, you could tell there was just like some minor shifts happening. It was like seeing a train on the train tracks at night, right? You could see the light was coming at you. You just couldn't tell, you couldn't really sense how far away it was. So this was when it was just barely starting to change a little bit. And it took a little while longer than we anticipated to sell. Then we did another one. And then the last one that I bought in '08 was just brutal. That was just terrible. By this time, I was a salesman for 84 Lumber. My wife was a purchasing agent for a large custom home builder. So, we were starting to see adjustments there in like standards and finishes and things that these builders were using. But the last one I bought in '08, it was in Deltona, Florida. It was a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, like standard brick ranch built in the 70s. They're all the same. And I bought mine for like $97,000, probate deal, identical house, like same floor plan, everything. 1 block over, 2 blocks down, it just sold for $214. 97, right? That's a layup, right? Like, that's a win by anybody's standards. That's a hit. So bought it in July, and then was, back in those days, I was more energy, skinnier and, a lot more ambitious. So I was like scraping ceilings, putting down tile. I did all the work myself, while I still had a job, and called my agent in maybe end of October, beginning of November. I'm like, hey, Shayna, I'm all done with this house. And she's like, yeah, well, let's list it in January because you don't want to do it during the holidays because you don't want to rack up a bunch of days on market. Nobody buys properties. I'm like, oh, that makes perfect sense. And she came in January and she's like, hey, it looks great. I'm like, I know. Did a great job. I know. I'm like, what do you think we can get for it? She's like, well, man, and this was back when they had notebooks, right? It's 2009, so Facebook was barely even a thing, right? So it's notebooks, and she's showing me all the comps. And she's like, probably like 142. One block over, 2 blocks down, 214. Yeah, that was last summer. And that's how fast the market had shifted in Florida. When it started to fall, it fell like a rock. And, in hindsight, we can look back and, and all these RIA meetings and all the education, all the stuff, they had been selling for years, all of these pre-foreclosure courses, right? Well, nobody was smart enough to think ahead. Well, yeah, the bank's taking all these properties back, right? Because hindsight's 2020, but what are they going to do with all these properties? Well, I'll tell you what they did in 2009. They flooded the market. And, so being a relatively young investor at the time would not, I had experience, but not a ton of experience. I'm like, well, my house is better. My house is rehabbed and those are foreclosures. Like, it was this dirty word. And she's like, yeah, but that's what they're selling for. I'm like, nope. I'm like, not doing it. So I'm like, put it out there at 159. And I thought I was being the most magnanimous SOB that's ever walked the face of the earth, right? Because my house was nice. It was remodeled nice. And these other houses barely had been junked out. And so that was January, like nothing. Not even a showing or a call in January. So February, I'm like, hey, what should we do? Like, she's like, well, you need to drop the price. I'm like, what do you think 155 would do it? And she like laughed at me. I'm like, oh man. I'm like, how about 147? She's like, okay. I'm like, do you think that'll do it? She's like, no. I'm like, what do you think it needs to be? She's like, well, probably 135. It's like a month and it's like dropped another 7,000. I'm like, I just can't do that because I had told my job, 84 Lumber, that I was leaving, and I'd already decided to move to Chattanooga to find a better place to invest. So we drop it to 147 or whatever it was, and maybe got a couple calls, but still no showings. And now I'm getting nervous because this was not how the last 7 or 8 rehabs went. Like, put it on the market, boom, sold, right? So let it go for a month, couple calls. Like, now I'm into March. I'm like, hey, like, if I go to 142, do you think it'll sell? She's like, you can try. But now it's like 129. And the way I explain it to people is like a real falling market, not this nonsense we did a year ago, right? Like a real falling market's like watching a fat kid chase a golf ball down the hill, right? Down asphalt. Like, you can't get ahead of it, right? It's falling so quickly. You just can't, you have to take such a price drop to get ahead of it. It's really difficult. So finally we ended up just selling it. Again, after 3 months of this nonsense, I'm like, okay, I've got to figure something else out. I can't sell it. Maybe I'll just do a lease option. Right. And because I, been around real estate groups and classes, I knew how to put out banner signs and advertise it. So I put out signs that said 3-2 Deltona, $5,000 down, owner will finance. And finally in June, I found somebody that, was a nurse, and she didn't have good enough credit to buy the house. And she gave us $5,000. By this point, all of our savings was depleted. And we rolled out of Florida in a U-Haul with all our stuff packed up. She was moving in, and we came to Chattanooga, and we were, I tell people we didn't even have enough money to be considered broke. We were half a broke. It was me, my wife, 2 boys, and 3 fat dogs, and my brother, and off we went to Chattanooga to do real estate, and knew absolutely nobody. It was the dumbest thing ever. I wouldn't ever tell somebody to do that, but luckily it worked out good for us.
David, do you have any idea what that house is worth today?
Oh, it stayed low for a while, but it's probably $350 now. And I was, in it for 97. I was trying to sell it for 154. So further down the road after we were gone, this tenant defaults. I put another tenant in there, and they stopped paying, had it filled with car parts and engines. It was just a mess, and made a terrible decision because I was buying so many properties with owner financing. I'm like, F the bank. I don't need them, take it back. And I tried to do a cash for keys thing for them, and they ended up just foreclosing on it. So that was a terrible decision. It really just stunted my credit for a bunch of years. Took me a long time to get out from underneath that. But yeah, it's got to be worth $300 or $350. It's 742 Trafalgar Street. Anybody can look it up.
So you've been through some roller coasters early on, and you've also I think been very scrappy in the beginning, right? As many people have to be with finding creative finance deals. Sounds like you maybe bought a probate, your first deal was a foreclosure. You did a lease or a sub two, which is basically where you're taking over existing debt on a property, but you're actually the owner, so you're the owner on title. So doing all these creative ways to get started. Some of them, it sounds like you went to the school of hard knocks, but you're still in real estate today. So let's fast forward a little bit. You made a statement before we started recording about you love real estate, you'll always be in it. Talk to us about where you're at today, and what that opinion has been like after that somewhat rocky start in real estate, and like why are you still in it, right?
I'm gonna pop in here real quick.
Sure.
That sold in May of 2022 for $311,000.
Sold at $3,350. Yeah.
So there you go.
It's a nice house. I mean, it's probably got all the same tile that I put down, and yeah, it was a great little house. So leaving there and coming to Chattanooga, we bought a house. I'd been going back and forth to Chattanooga a little bit, and we purchased a house. Well, I looked at a house. We had an agreement to buy it, subject to. So we were taking over the existing financing. And it's funny, when you see something and then you go back to it 3 months later, you sort of romanticize what these properties look like. And we left Florida. We drove straight through. It's 577 miles. Went to the closing. Went to the house at like 7:00 at night, and just exhausted. And, I'm walking through. My wife hadn't been there. Of course, the kids hadn't been there. And I'm like, this house is terrible. Like, it wasn't in the best part of town. It was like on the wrong side of the mountain, sort of in the downtown area. It was a little bit crooked. Doors didn't close right. There was like a mouse running through because it had been vacant. The power only worked in half the house. And that night, basically all we could do was have the energy to drag a couple mattresses and a fan because it didn't have central heat and air in June of 2009, middle of the summer. And man, I'll tell you, people talk about this thing on Facebook and Instagram, like burn the boats and, have no way out. And, essentially I did that. But I remember going to sleep that night in that house and just thinking, oh my God, what have I done? Like, I left a really nice house that was fully remodeled. And I brought my wife and kids to this house, to the city where we don't know anybody. I kind of knew one realtor that I'd met a few times, and we're coming up here to do real estate. And like, I really have no money. We're in the dump of a house. And like, I'm going to tell you, I cried myself to sleep that night. It was like the lowest moment ever. Something as a father and a husband, my God, what have I done? Like, surely I could have stayed in Florida, even though I, knew I was going to lose my job because sales were terrible. Like, I could have found another job. So to answer your question, how did you stay with it? Too dumb to quit, I guess, really. I mean, I believe that real estate worked. And so I'll tell you where we're at now. Now, I don't do any active wholesaling. I just had to stop that because our transactions company has just gotten so big, and we work with investors all over the country. But sort of where we started from that point when we got to Chattanooga, again, we were talking before we jumped on here, like my intention was to come here and buy a bunch of rental properties, right? Like all investors, we wanted to do the monopoly thing, right? Single family, duplex, quad, apartment complex. But the environment in 2009 was nobody was lending money, right? What were banks doing? They were taking properties back. They were so underwater, they were just fighting for their lives. They weren't, unless you had like an 850 credit score and 40% down, they just weren't in the business of lending money. So, the only thing that I could do, we had to figure out wholesaling, which is funny because I tried wholesaling when I lived in Florida and it didn't work, right? I just, probably because I had a great job and I didn't need it to work. And now that I've wholesaled like almost 1,700 properties, people kind of laugh at that when I tell them I was a failed wholesaler. But again, a wife, 2 boys, 3 fat dogs, we had to figure something out. So we started putting out banner times. We buy houses, like we had to generate money. And, I think the reason that we were so successful is a couple of reasons. One, I had no other option, right? I had to do something. It was I tell people, it was like the first thing I thought about, the only thing I did all day, and the last thing I thought about at night, because you have people you have to provide for. Like, it has to work. There was no other plan B. So, we wholesaled about 40 deals our first year, but I still wanted to buy rental properties, right? Because I'm like, I know that is the way to build long-term wealth. So, I'm talking to all these leads and talking to all these people, and, somebody calls me, hey, I want $80,000 for my house. I'm like, well, I can give you 60 because that's the number that makes sense. They're like, yeah, well, I owe 80,000 on it. So like, I just was kind of hitting this wall all the time back when all that was going on. So I remembered something from years before the speaker. It said, he was talking about the number of properties in the United States that are owned free and clear and what that percentage is. Do you guys have any idea what it is? The percentage of properties in the U.S. that are owned free and clear.
I think it's like 40% or higher. I remember hearing a high stat.
Yeah, not many people get it. It's between 32 and 42, depending upon where you're looking. I pulled up First American the other day, and they said 42% of the properties. So I'm like, oh my God, if 42% of the properties in the United States are owned free and clear, why don't I just market to them, right? Because if I make you make 180, and if I offer you 60 and you can't take it, that's one thing. But I can offer you 60 to a free and clear, and they may not like it, but they could take it, right? So I just got really good at, talking to as many people as possible, making them a cash offer. If they couldn't take it, then I would be like, well, Zach, let me ask you a question, man. I'd really rather buy this with cash, but do you need all the money at once? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. But, the best closer in wholesaling, somebody like RJ Bates closes 1 out of 10 leads. Well, what do you do with the other 9? So when you learn how to add this kind of stuff into your screening, you're just getting another bite at the apple, right? So not everybody's going to say, yeah, you could pay me over time, but people will, right? And that's really how we built our rental portfolio.
Yes, so you did a lot of creative finance, it sounds like, which we've certainly talked about on the show, and I think there's some key nuggets in there. If you're looking to, you have limited capital and you want to be a creative investor to scale, these are all, actionable things that you can do, right? If you have someone that has a free clear property, maybe they don't need all that cash at once. Maybe it doesn't make sense for them to take all that cash at once for a tax purpose. Mm-hmm. If they have a loan on the property and it's distressed, maybe it's subject to, these are all arrows in the quiver that you can use, in your arsenal to potentially acquire more deals with creative finance. David, I think most of our audience, there's probably some interest around that as well, but a lot of our audience is maybe in the sphere of like, I'm a newer investor, I'm looking to get into rental properties for, consistent cash flow long-term and scale, not necessarily being a landlord and maybe not having to go through that scrappy start that you did. What are some pieces of advice that you learned throughout your journey? I mean, wealth is built in holding real estate over time, 100%. You know what I mean? And using the cash flow to at some point maybe have supplemental income or, some sort of retirement picture. We always talk about buying areas in good locations, good teams, and letting real estate do what it does over time. For the properties that you've held and you didn't wholesale or flip or anything like that, tell us about, during your extensive journey, what are some key nuggets of knowledge that you learned through just holding real estate over time that maybe you didn't anticipate?
Yeah. I 100% never anticipated that the properties were going to appreciate like they did. And to go back to, the way I did, and I tell people what I did is not for everybody, right? What I did was probably silly because all of our chips were in the middle, but we were broke and there was no other way to do it, right? And I self-managed and I did a lot of those things in the beginning because we just had to find a way to make it work. Now I've got property management in place and I don't really do anything, for these properties. And honestly, they do a far better job of managing the properties and making sure that the rents are maximized and that the properties are kept clean and somebody's doing inspections and doing all those things. But the things that I've learned are, when you buy these properties and you have any kind of stable financing, whether you took over a mortgage or you get bank financing or you have owner financing, whatever it is that financing, it's going to be steady, right? For 15, 20, 30 years, however long the term of your loan is going to be. So as long as you have adequate cash flow at the very beginning, which again, for me, I was comfortable with $100 to $200 a door because I had money coming in from my wholesaling company. But that $100 or $200 per door per month over time is going to grow because rents are going to go up. I've pulled charts. I'm sure you guys have seen the data. Like rents over the last 70 years just continue to go up, right? It's inflation. Very rarely do rents ever go down unless you're in a real volatile area. Typically, they might flatline for a little bit, but over time, they're always going up. So not only you're going to get that increased cash flow, but your tenants are going to be the ones paying down the mortgage, right? So you're getting equity pay down. I'm not an accountant and have a very loose understanding of how accounting works, even after doing it for all these years. But the depreciation and the tax benefits are just just absolutely amazing. And even as much as we were wholesaling and rehabbing, my rentals offset the vast majority of that income.
Yeah. So time, I think, and that's, all the pieces that you put into place with management, I think that's certainly important. But yeah, it's interesting thinking back over my portfolio. A lot of times I think new investors, they're looking at real estate like, what does the picture look like today, right?
Yeah.
What does cash flow look like? Because it's tangible, what the rent's going to be. You can calculate your mortgage expense,
Sure.
And you can maybe be a little do some forward forecasting on things like, debt reduction with your amortization, because that's a set schedule. But what's hard to conceptualize is, and no one really knows. I mean, you can look at past trends and projected growth for an area, but you don't really know what the growth is going to be like with appreciation and rental increase. But yeah, time and time again, I am consistently surprised about how much properties increase in value over time and how much the rents increase year after year. To your point, like, it's not getting any cheaper, and it never will to live in the U.S. So
it's unbelievable, and I do. We were talking about reels and short form content. I do a bunch on Instagram, and people will comment, yeah, well, sure, if you bought stuff in 2010, of course it's worth more. I'm like, bro, we thought the world was coming to an end in 2010. Like, nobody had this crystal ball going, oh, rents are going to triple and properties are going to 5x in value. Like I was just very happy with, okay, great. I'm going to have a couple $100 a month for, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, 17 years, whatever the length of my term of my note is. And when it's done, it's going to be paid off and I'm going to have this cash flow every month. So I wasn't counting on appreciation in the rent. Like, that wasn't the thing, and for me, and again, I tell people, like, what I did is, maybe it's not typical, but the way that I structured all of my stuff is, I really started when I was like 39, almost 40, buying these properties. So I was mad. Like, I wanted to be retired at 50, So the way that I always approached my deals is, how quickly can I get them paid off, right? If you're 20, put it on a 30-year note if you want, right? But you don't want to be going on a 30-year note at 40, right? Because if you can't, there's no guarantee that the rents are going to go up. They probably are, but there's never a guarantee. So for me, I just wanted to get to the end as quickly as possible, right? I wanted that $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 a month in cash flow. So I would sacrifice cash flow for a compressed amortization schedule, right? So every deal that I put together, I was always like, I'm playing with the mortgage calculator. Like, how can I shrink this, the number of years on this note down to the absolute minimum that I can bear, right? As far as, because, the shorter you get, the less cash flow you have. So how quickly can I pay these people off? So, I definitely could have had more cash flow at the beginning, but now I'm in a position where all of my notes are going to pay off in the next 5 to 7 years, right before I turn 60. So at, 60, I could be done and just go sit on a beach someplace and, collect $60,000 a month. Even if half of it goes to repairs, property management, taxes, you can still live pretty good off $30,000 a month. I mean,
yeah,
not $30,000 this month and next month, like after taxes, that's pretty good.
Yeah, all of these people who are yelling, of course, if you bought in 2010, are probably the people saying, of course, if you bought in 2020,
yeah, right,
it's worth a lot more now, and of course this, of course that. It's like, eventually, you just got to get off. You just got to get in the game, and
you do, and
get off the pot.
Yeah, you guys had said that, right? Like, buy and wait. Just let the market do its job. Let the tenants pay down that mortgage or that underlying debt. And it's interesting. This is interesting thing happened. I had this private wholesaling client in San Jose years ago, like 2010 or 11. I was all the way out there, and she took me to this local RIA meeting, and I'll remember forever. There's this old timer. Now I'm the old timer, right? This guy's like sitting at a local meetup or RIA group, whatever, and he's sitting on a bench, and everybody's peppering him with questions, and all these young kids are trying to like trip him up. Like, well, what percentage of ARV do you buy your rentals at? And this guy probably had 500 rentals around San Francisco. He's like, man, I don't care. And they're like, hey, what do you mean? He's like, as long as I have cash flow, I don't care if I'm paying 120% of what the value is, because I'm in this for the long term. Like, I'm not in this for 3 months or 6 months. Like, I'm buying these things to hold forever and pass down to my great grandkids. It doesn't matter to me. As long as I have good cash flow and I've got stable underlying financing, again, I know the rents are going to go up. Like, I'm okay with paying full retail. And, when I look back at the spreadsheet of the stuff I bought, like, I bought way above tax value a lot of times because I had incredibly favorable terms. I had terms where I could close literally the next day. They weren't pulling credit. I was into most of my deals with zero down, a lot of times getting cash at closing from deposits and proration of rent. So, Yeah, I mean, that's definitely always.
There was one of my mentors early on, because I also started wholesaling for a few years, and I would end up holding a lot of those properties, and I was very happy that I did over time. One of my mentors always told me, in the realm of like creative finance and wholesaling, you can have your price or you can have your terms. You know what I mean? But you can't have both. But both of those paths lead to just acquiring an asset, right? And there's different ways that you can structure things. I mean, we have a lot of creative finance options right now with our investors with new construction, where you can get a 5% equity credit where you can buy below market value. You can use that same amount to buy the rate down to, in some cases as low as 3.99%. That allows you to cash flow more. You can take that credit at closing, where it can reduce your down payment to that 5%. So it's less money in a pocket. You can match that with a 5% down credit union loan and actually be into a property for zero money down. But it's all about, like, you need to know what's fitting your goals and what makes the most sense. And there's a lot of different ways you can skin the cat in real estate, but it's all about how do you strategically own the real estate to accomplish the goal. No one's really going to retire. Cash flow is important, and it's important to support the investment, but like most people are not looking to retire off of cash flow today. So you do need to be a little forward forecasting. But David, let's switch gears. Talk about your business that's blown up, and like, what are you guys doing?
Yeah. So and first off, and that's why I love you guys and resonating with so happy to be on the podcast. I think it's great that, what you do for your investors, because not everybody has the ability to do the thing that I did, right? Like other people have just, you have a normal job, but they realize that investing in real estate is so important. It gives them, some offsets for their taxes. So I think it's fantastic that you guys, provide that, just service for them. So now Easy REI Closings, we are the nation's largest transaction coordination company. So what that means is, we do basically all of the paperwork for, your everyday full-time investors, the wholesalers and the investors all across the country. And, about 3 years ago, when COVID happened and everything went virtual very, very quickly, we realized that there was nobody that helped investors or filled that niche, across the country. And, we were able to just step into just an empty market and, really just help these investors sort of just spin the wheel of their business faster and faster. Because, what a lot of those guys do, guys and gals, like the full-time wholesalers and investors, is they're very entrepreneurial hustler mindset, which is fantastic. They make a lot of money doing that. But the thing that they're terrible at is paperwork, right? I know, because I'm that person, right? My bookkeeper hates me. My accountant hates me. My lawyers, I'm always behind on stuff for them. So, we're able to take all of that paperwork just completely off their desk so they can do the thing that they like to do, which is talking to sellers, making deals, talking to, to buyers, and, either flipping these properties or adding them to their own portfolio. So that's, that's, I guess, the reason why we've seen such big growth. And in 2002, we did $238 million in transactions and somewhere over 2,200 files, I think we did for our clients. And we'll do somewhere closer to 350 million this year. So we're on a big growth tear right now.
And transaction coordination, like very, very specifically, this is, hey, especially like in a wholesale contract, you have, if you have a dual closing, for example, you have the investor, they get the contract signed, and then they turn it over to you, right? Yeah. And you deal with title, or you have a title company in house, and then you deal with actually going through the transaction. Do you have any involvement with the parties involved beyond just the closing table, or?
Yeah, we do every single thing. It's a complete white glove service for our investors. Literally, as you said, they'll get their contract signed and they'll hand that over to us. It's sort of like a baton and a relay race, and they are done. So from there, we'll reach out to their seller, and sort of have that conversation. Hey, Mrs. Smith, you're working with Zach over on your deal at 123 Main Street. Hey, Mrs. Smith, I'm going to be your point of contact from here all the way to closing. So you're out. Like, you're out. Go get your next deal. Hey, Mrs. Smith, I need to collect some information for the title company so I can get you paid just as quickly as possible. And, then we'll start to ask questions, hey, tell me what's going on with the property. Because there's so many variations, right? Like, what do wholesalers and investors do? They get paid for solving problems, right? So what are problems? Bankruptcy, divorce, bad tenant, all the different things. And sometimes they get 5 of those things. They stack all those problems together, which is great. But, it takes some experience to understand how to clear all of those issues before you can go and either buy the property for yourself or sell it to another investor, right? We always guarantee clear title and proration of taxes. So yeah, typically that is our life. We're dealing with, heirs who, have a property, but maybe like can't find death certificates or don't know where the trust documents are, or don't have any of the paperwork from the last closing. And, that's not something that anybody teaches any normal investor how to do. And every transaction can be completely different from the last 50 that you've done. So we just have a lot of experience in solving.
Yeah. Those can become quite complicated transactions. Adam, was it you or Grant that recently was buying a house and there was a death?
That was Grant. He had a lot of fun with that.
The seller died and then immediately went into probate mid transaction, and it's like, well, now you got to go through the probate process and
fun with that.
Yeah, so we're always tracking down heirs. Oh, so and so's in prison, no problem. Actually, we like people that are in prison because they're very easy to find. They're in the system. We can pinpoint right where they are. But other times it'll be, oh, my wife's in Europe and we need her to sign. Great, we got to get her to a consulate or an embassy where there's a U.S. notary. So it's just solving all of those types of problems. And we've done some with like 18 heirs, and let me tell you, that is like herding cats on crack. Just trying to get all of them to relatively the same place, or to get notaries to all of them, on the same day to close some of these things. So yeah, our clients could certainly do that themselves. You could change your own oil. You may not do it quick or effectively. You may screw up your engine, but we can do it for them at a really high level and very quickly. And what it does is it just gives them more time to do the parts of the business that they like to do, which is the marketing and talking to sellers and talking to buyers. And nobody loves doing paperwork. I own the company, and I wouldn't like doing it on a daily basis.
There you go. You find the pain points and you find people who can solve it, even if that person is not necessarily you.
Yeah, we hired two.
The problems. You can teach them how to solve the problems. That doesn't mean you have to do it every day.
Yeah. We hired 2 new coordinators yesterday, and I was in talking to them this morning. I'm like, understand our clients, who they are, and what their personality type is. And I'm that guy. Like, I get it. I created this for me and for a couple of my friends, and it just sort of blew up. But yeah, we're just here to help them close deals and make more money.
All right, fantastic. Well, we're going to have a link to David's company so you can see everything about that. It's going to be in the show notes, so click on that link. Do there, David. Any other piece of advice you would give to someone who is sitting on there right now saying, "Man, of course, if you bought in 2010, of course, if you bought in 2020," and they're sitting here doing the paralysis of analysis. What do you say to those new people who walk in?
I'm going to tell you, in 2010 and 2012 and 2014 and 2016, we had no idea that the market was going to go up. But history tells us, the statistics show us that it is going to continue to go up. There's nothing that indicates there's any kind of crash coming. We're at an all-time low. We're at rock bottom of foreclosures in the last 100 years. There's no massive short sales coming. Even people who are behind right now, they have so much equity. These properties are going to just come to market and be sold. The fact is there's an incredible housing shortage right now. So like, no matter what goes on with the market, because what happened is, right, in 2010, builders stopped turning dirt, right? They stopped building, investors stopped rehabbing, right? So what does that mean? Like, all of a sudden there was just less on the market. So you have a supply and demand issue. This is really why everything took off, in 2013 and 14. And then again with COVID a couple of years later, everybody stopped building, right? Well, you know what didn't stop happening? People did not stop having babies, right? For the last 40 years, people still been having babies. So population is growing, and now we've got this shrunken supply, and we have half of the inventory that we need. So, my non-economic, non-accountant view is like, prices are just going to continue to go up. So I would say, get in the market. Just get in the market. You guys have lots of great programs for people where they can buy it at a fair price or even a little bit below the market. So, man, I tell people real estate has given me a life that I probably do not even deserve, but I would not have that if I didn't take that risk and jump in and get involved in the game. And again, it's, I've been able to travel all around the world and do a lot of amazing things because of real estate. So, I'm the biggest believer in, having rentals and holding them long-term, and it will 100% change your life. And, the decisions that you make now, 20 years from now, you will thank your past self for taking that risk and, getting involved with guys like you.
Absolutely. Well, I don't know if I could say better than that. So we're going to wrap it up right there. So if you want to head on over to renttoretirement.com and see what inventory we have that you could buy today and thank yourself 4 and 5 years, you can find it right there, renttoretirement.com. You can schedule a time to talk with us right there on the website. Don't forget, if you have questions you want us to answer in future episodes, go ahead and send that on over to podcast@renttoretirement.com. That's podcast@rentretirement.com. Of course, the link to David's company is in the show notes. So check it out there, click it and see what he's all about and how he can help you and your real estate business. Really appreciate the time you spent educating yourselves with us today. We'll talk to you on the next episode.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks for watching the Rent to Retirement YouTube channel. Check out some of our other videos, like this one, or this one here.